Good afternoon, everybody. It's been a long time since I've uploaded. Today's story comes in from Steve Dingman out of Iowa, and I find him to be a very credible witness. Thank you for sending in your encounter. I've known him for about 2 years. He is one heck of an outdoorsman and trapper, so I find him extremely credible. I hope you guys enjoy this story. Please go ahead and like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell if you do not want to miss all the upcoming uploads for the Sasquatch series. If you have an encounter of your own, please feel free to email me. It'll be in the description down below, or you can leave a comment and I'll get back to you under the video that I'm posting today. Thanks, everybody. I hope you enjoy and have a good afternoon. It was the 1st of October, 1985. I'd gotten permission to deer hunt on this airstrip land to thin the deer population. Apparently, he was landing in the evenings, and the strip was covered with deer. I'd been visiting this property a lot that summer, putting up stands and making blinds. One blind that I'd built was my favorite by far. It was windproof, and I sat back into pushed-over trees, so I was pretty much hidden. So opening morning, being very excited, I had not slept the night before, much like always during hunting season, pheasant, duck, deer gun season, trapping season. I can't sleep. So naturally I got parked, hiked up about 500 yards to my blind, and climbed in and got comfortable. I heard all the normal night things: coons chattering, fighting a skunk, calling of owls in the tree lines. There was no cell phones back then, no electronic handheld games. Soon I started hearing birds start fluttering around. No singing yet, but they were just fluttering around. I could see it was beginning to get light out. The birds were beginning to chirp, and I would say it's about 45 minutes before sunrise. It was at twilight time when you can kind of see and can't see. I caught movement on my left coming out of the thick weeds and under the brush. It came out super slow and stayed tight to the weeds. It was 25 yards away, and it was moving away from me. Now I for sure thought it was a deer, and it was about 3.5 feet off the ground, but it looked short in length. And that's the first thought I had seeing it. But it was twilight still, and it didn't move for several minutes. Well, from the place it stopped, I'd seen movement, but what I thought was ears, but it just wasn't typical deer movement. Then it moved forward. It looked like it leaned forward and then brought its legs up under it. I then knew what I was looking at wasn't right. A deer with broken legs from a car crash, or maybe it was a dog that had old and bad hind legs that didn't work so good. Everything that I knew in those woods played through my mind. What was I seeing? The first thing my mind did was try to rationalize what I had just seen. It had to just be a deer reaching out for a leaf like I've seen him do 100 times before. My mind was racing and my heart was pounding, and my ears were popping like that feeling you get when an airplane lands. At this point, I had heard a car or truck coming down the road, maybe 600 yards to my right, and this thing rolled its shoulders forward and down, and it looked like a cedar bush until the vehicle passed by. And it slowly raised its shoulders back up, but this time I could see its head and notice it was dark, and it had long hair on it, not fur, as fur covers the body. I could see places where it had worn the hair down, in places like the back of its elbows, its butt, and across the shoulders. I was still not thinking Sasquatch. It wasn't really big enough, and it wasn't standing up. It was more like a duck walking, like a kid imitating a duck. Walking, but only it would take these steps like it was in slow motion. When I finally realized that it was a juvenile Bigfoot, the fear level went up tenfold. All I had on me was my hunting bow, a knife, and a 1-liter Mountain Dew bottle. The wide mouth kind you can use to go pee in when you're stuck in a tree stand. Hunters know what I'm talking about. It was getting lighter now, and I could make out much more of its body. It held its arms tight to itself, and its knees had to be up by its face. It was turned away from me, but it still kept reaching out to the weeds like it was catching stuff. At this point, so many things were going through my mind, like how stupid I was to be out in the woods with no gun. And who were to hear me if I screamed? I was only 30 yards from it. It was getting close to 30 minutes before sunrise. As I could see much more of it, it had a grayish colored skin under its hair. Its head was small, I thought, because it wasn't above its shoulders, but its hair on its head was longer than the rest of its upper back. But when it got close to its waist, it was the same length as the hair on its head. And I finally figured out what it was doing. It was eating those green grasshoppers. You know, those big 3-inch long ones when you have a really hot summer? And there were a bunch of them. They were everywhere. It was probably 40 degrees that morning, and it had rained the day before. That's why I didn't drive to the hangar where I usually parked. It was eating those grasshoppers like popcorn, and now I could see its hands they looked massive with really thick fingers, but they weren't like human hands. I don't know, they just didn't have the dexterity that we have. I had seen it try to catch one that fell to the ground, and it looked like it was having a hell of a time picking it up. Now it had moved about 10 yards and about 4 scoots. Seemed like it might have long legs. It just seemed to move far and not that many moves. From behind, it looked like a girl's butt. It was wide at the bottom, it had an hourglass waist, and seemed to narrow up at the shoulders. Now I was beginning to panic. My mind was trying to figure out a face for it. But of course my mind came up with nothing short of a nightmare, and I was praying to God that it wouldn't look at me or turn this way. Now I was hoping that it would head towards the river so I could bail, run to my station wagon, head home, and never return. Then out of nowhere, there was a whistle. It sounded like a widgeon or a duck-like sound, and it must have been an alarm-type call. As this thing turned slightly to its left, its arms came up and grabbed a handful of weeds, and its legs bolted out in front of it like a switchblade, and it was gone. There was a little rustle, but it was gone, and it was gone quietly. I was relieved for about 2 seconds before I thought there was more around me. I can't see anywhere but out in front of me, and I knew there was one waiting on me behind the tree pile I was in. I was in complete meltdown mode. I dove out of the blind, breaking my quiver and bowstring. The bow was on my wrist. I ran towards the barn. I fell down countless times, each of which I was sure one was behind me and was going to pounce on me and eat me. I finally made it to the wagon. I went home, told my wife I was sick, and went to bed, and slept for 3 days, never answering my phone for anybody, not my mom or my hunting buddies. And my wife said all I did was yell at her to let me sleep. I have night terrors still. I freak out if I hear noises like little footsteps or tiny noises like a cat playing with something at night while I'm sleeping. I still can't go out into the woods without there being light. Thank you for listening, everybody. And if you have an encounter you would like to share, possibly on my channel, leave a comment down below or reach out to me on my email, which will be linked in the description. Thanks, everybody, and have a great afternoon.